Do we have any authority to ignore Paul's inspired qualifications for elders and deacons? Do we have any authority for man-made requirements? Do we have any authority to ordain women as elders? Do we trust the God-inspired Paul with instructions for all time, or do we bend them to suit the whims of a sinful world? Let's find out in 1 Timothy 3. The word for a local church leader is variously translated as supervisor, church official, overseer, elder, bishop, and church leader. They're all appropriate words. Here's a trustworthy saying: whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Let's look at these qualifications in depth. The first quality cannot mean sinlessly perfect, because none of us is that. It can mean a good reputation, above reproach, and blameless. A bishop then must be blameless. Second is the family role, variously translated as faithful to their spouse, faithful in marriage, the husband of one wife, faithful to his wife. The phrase husband of one wife is more literal to the original Greek, and several seem to be interpretations bowing to modern gender-neutral culture than honest translations. This is easily understood as being a married male role, though unmarried men were certainly also implied, as Paul would have disqualified himself. Though women could be prophets and evangelists, is there any authority here to make anyone elders except men, the husband of one wife? For this next trait, with so many different translations, how can we summarize? Various translations are sober, self-controlled, sober-minded, stable, vigilant, and temperate. Temperate means self-controlled and not necessarily a teetotaler. Self-control in regard to alcohol is mentioned later and wouldn't be duplicated here. He must have self-control in regard to life, temperate. A fourth trait is variously translated as modest, sensible, self-controlled, sober-minded, and live wisely. This has to do with sober maturity of thought. Sober-minded. The fifth trait is variously translated as honest, well-behaved, respectable, of good behavior, a good reputation, and modest. Basically, the Greek refers to a well-ordered life of good behavior. Of good behavior. The sixth trait we're looking for in an elder is variously related to hospitality, hospitable to strangers, friendly to strangers, and enjoy having guests in his home, hospitable. The seventh attribute is variously rendered as skilled at teaching, able to teach, an able teacher, teachable, apt to teach, skillful in teaching, and good at teaching. The only one out of line with the overall consensus is teachable, which means something entirely different. The Greek actually agrees with the consensus, able to teach, able to teach. The eighth character trait is variously rendered as they shouldn't be addicted to alcohol. They must not be heavy drinkers, not a drunkard, not addicted to wine. He must not drink excessively, not given to wine, not addicted to wine, not overindulging in wine, not given to drunkenness. He must not be a heavy drinker, and not a drinker, not given to wine. The ninth quality is variously translated as not a bully, troublemakers, violent, no striker, or pugnacious. It comes from the Greek meaning bruiser, ready to blow. A pugnacious, contentious, quarrelsome person, not violent. The 10th trait is variously rendered as gentle, patient, or considerate. The consensus seems to be almost universal, but gentle. The order seems to change with some translations, but it seems that the next attribute is variously translated as peaceable, kind, not quarrelsome, argumentative, not a brawler, and not contentious, not quarrelsome. The next trait is also a bit jumbled in various translations, but seems to be similar to not greedy, not love money, not greedy of filthy lucre or money, not greedy for money, not covetous. The 13th trait is sometimes exaggerated as elders having even perfect adult children. The Greek actually refers to dependent children being submissive and respectful, not adult children who are independent. If an adult child of an elder goes astray, it cannot be considered as much different than Adam and Eve choosing to sin, and we can't blame God for that. One who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. For if a man doesn't know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? The 14th attribute is variously rendered in words similar to not new believers, new followers, a recent convert, or a novice. Pride and arrogance are too dangerous to play with. Not a novice, lest being puffed up with pride, he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. Reputation in the community outside the church is also very important. Why must an elder be free to serve without the burden of false accusations and similar traps of the devil? He must also have a good reputation with outsiders so that he'll not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. Must deacons or ministers or servants be qualified? From the start, deacons were in charge of issues like caring for the needs of widows. Likewise, deacons must be reverent, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for money, holding the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience. Should they first be tested or closely examined? Before they're appointed as deacons, let them be closely examined. If they pass the test, then let them serve as deacons. Is this next verse talking about female deacons or the wives of deacons? The passage is variously translated women who are servants, their wives, and women. Okay, then what does the original Greek say? It just says women. The addition of the word their or the words who are servants are interpretations, not a translation. So whether or not this is speaking of deaconesses or the wives of deacons is really a little unclear in this verse. Do the next verses make it quite clear? Let servants or deacons be husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their own houses well. For those who have served well gain for themselves a good understanding and great boldness in the faith which is in Christ. What is a description of the church? I hope to come to you quickly, but I'm writing these things to you so that if I'm delayed, you'll know how you should behave in God's household. It's the church of the living God and the backbone and support of the truth. What is the great mystery of godliness? Is this a good confession to remember? Great indeed, we confess, is the mystery of godliness. He was manifested in the flesh, vindicated by the Spirit, seen by angels, proclaimed among the nations, believed on in the world, taken up in glory. Do we have any authority to ignore Paul's inspired qualifications for elders and deacons? Do we have authority to insist upon an MDiv or other degree before ordination? Or would continuing education simply be good advice after Paul's qualifications are met? Are many of our mainline churches ignoring Paul's inspired qualifications in favor of oppressively burdensome man-made requirements? Do we have any authority to ordain women as elders or deacons? Do we trust that God inspired Paul with instructions for all time? Or do we bend them to suit the whims of the prejudices of a sinful world? You decide.